The surrogate deception. My wife and I used her sister as a surrogate, but I just found out the baby was conceived naturally between her and my husband. I am 42 years old, and I work as a forensic accountant. My job is to find secrets hidden inside of spreadsheets. I never thought I would have to apply that skill to my own life. My husband Mark's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter last night. I picked it up just to order a gift for my sister, Emily. She had just given birth to our son a week ago. The doctors had told me I would never be able to carry a child myself. Emily's offer to be our surrogate felt like a miracle. I was looking for a jewelry website that Mark had mentioned. That is when a small notification popped up on his screen. It was a link to a shared photo album with a very generic name. I felt a small surge of excitement thinking it held new baby pictures, so I tapped on the notification without a second thought. The album was not full of pictures of our new son. It contained dozens of images of Mark and my sister together. They were not the kind of pictures a man takes with his sister-in-law. Then I saw the screenshots of their text messages saved as images. My husband told my sister how much he loved her. He wrote about their secret nights together over the past year. They celebrated that their natural plan had finally worked. They joked about the expensive IVF treatments we were still paying for. They called it our little insurance policy just in case. The final message was from Mark to Emily, sent after the birth. It said he was so proud of her and their beautiful boy. I stood there in the silent kitchen staring at the phone's glow. My entire world simply dissolved into a quiet, humming void. The floor felt like it was miles below my feet. We spent nearly a decade trying to have our own child. Every month was another cycle of hope followed by a familiar emptiness. The doctors used cold medical terms that felt like a final sentence. We drained our savings account on treatments with diminishing odds. Mark was my constant support through all those painful years. He held me after every negative test we received in the mail. He told me our love was more than enough for him. He planned weekend trips to get my mind off the failures. My sister Emily would often come over with dinner on the bad days. She would listen to me cry for hours about the unfairness of it all. My sister and I were always incredibly close growing up. I believed that I could tell her absolutely anything. One evening, after another failed IVF cycle, she made her incredible offer. She sat us down and said she wanted to carry our baby for us. It felt like the clouds had finally parted after a long storm. Our parents cried with joy when we told them the news. They praised my sister for having such a generous and selfless spirit. The whole family celebrated this beautiful solution to our pain. Mark looked at my sister with so much open gratitude. He started calling her our family's angel and our personal hero. I believed we were the luckiest people in the entire world. We had turned a private tragedy into a story of pure family love. Looking back now, I remember how their private jokes started. I just thought it was their way of bonding over the pregnancy. I ignored how he started buying her gifts without telling me first. It all seemed like innocent gratitude at the time. I did not sleep for a single minute that entire night. The phone's screen felt burned into the back of my eyes. The next day felt like I was moving through a thick fog. I desperately tried to convince myself that I had misunderstood it. Maybe the texts were some kind of very sick inside joke. I told myself there had to be an innocent explanation for it all. I decided to approach him carefully without showing him what I found. I waited until Mark came home from his office that evening. I asked him a simple question while we were cleaning the kitchen. I mentioned that he and Emily had seemed incredibly close lately. The warmth in his expression immediately vanished from his face. He responded to me with a cold and unfamiliar anger. He asked if I was seriously accusing him of something improper. He said my sister had performed a miracle for our new family. He told me I should be ashamed for having such ugly thoughts. He then suggested my hormones were making me paranoid. He claimed I was just tired and stressed from having a new baby. He said I was inventing things to ruin our happiness. It was the first time he had ever spoken to me with such cruelty. His aggressive denial told me more than the photos ever could. The small sliver of hope I had been holding on to died. The man I married was gone, replaced by a cold stranger. I knew then that I was completely and utterly on my own. His cruel and angry words echoed in my mind for days. I started to believe that I was the actual problem. Maybe he was right about all the stress I was under. Perhaps I had imagined the malice in all their messages. I tried my best to act normal around him again. We fell back into a tense and very quiet daily routine. I focused all my energy on taking care of the baby. Mark acted as if our terrible conversation had never happened. My mother called me on the phone later that week. She spent 20 minutes talking about what a saint Emily was. She said I was incredibly lucky to have such a perfect husband. Every one of her cheerful words felt like a sharp knife. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt for my dark thoughts. These two people had given me the greatest gift of my life. And here I was accusing them of the worst betrayal imaginable. I began to seriously question my own memories of that night. I even thought about deleting the pictures from his phone for good. Maybe it would be much easier if I just did not know. I desperately wanted to go back to the simple life I had before, but the truth sat in my stomach like a heavy stone. I was caught between the beautiful lie and the ugly truth. This confusion felt worse than the initial shock of discovery. It was a special kind of loneliness that no one could see. My period of denial was shattered by a simple white envelope. It arrived in the mail addressed to Mark, but I opened it by mistake. I assumed it was just another bill or a piece of junk mail. Inside was a lab report for our son from a clinic I did not recognize. Most of the document was filled with medical terms I did not understand. I saw my name listed as the intended mother on the form, but then I saw something else that made my blood run completely cold. Next to the title of biological mother was my sister Emily's name. Next to biological father, I saw my husband Mark's name. My own genetic information was not anywhere on that entire page. The report was confirming the parentage of our child for their records. It was the kind of cold, hard evidence that could not be denied. This paper was not a joke or a misunderstanding like a text. The document completely destroyed the last of my hopeful delusions. That afternoon, I started digging for more information like a true accountant. I logged into our shared credit card and bank accounts online. I spent hours going through every single transaction from the last year. A clear and undeniable pattern started to emerge from the numbers. I found a charge for a very expensive dinner on a night Mark was supposedly working late. The restaurant was located in the same town where my sister lives. I discovered multiple charges for a hotel in her city. The dates corresponded perfectly with his supposed overnight business trips. Then I found the statements from the actual fertility clinic we used. The payments we made were much smaller than I had remembered. They had obviously faked the last two failed IVF transfer procedures. They used our money for their romantic getaways. Instead, I printed every single receipt, statement, and the damning lab report. I spread all the papers out across the dining room table. It looked just like one of my cases from work. The evidence painted a perfect picture of a long and calculated betrayal. My confusion was finally gone, replaced by a chilling and heavy clarity. I was not a paranoid wife. I was simply the last person to know the truth. I lived with the evidence for 3 days in complete silence. I kept the stack of papers hidden in my home office drawer. My pain had solidified into a cold and heavy object in my chest. I watched Mark and Emily interact with a new, terrifying clarity. They were so confident in their deception and in my ignorance. The baby's christening was scheduled for that Sunday afternoon. Our house filled with relatives and friends for the reception afterward. They all spoke about the miracle of our son's birth. They praised Emily's selflessness and Mark's unwavering support for me. I felt like a ghost watching a play about my own life. I smiled and accepted their congratulations with a hollow heart. I went through all the required motions of the perfect hostess. Mark was holding the baby near the fireplace, looking like a proud father. Emily came over to adjust the baby's small white blanket. Her hand rested on top of Mark's for just a moment too long. They shared a private look that was not meant for me to see. It was a look of deep intimacy and of shared ownership. In that 1 second, I saw their entire secret world laid bare. That small moment was the final confirmation I needed. The time for my silent observation was officially over. I felt a strange calm wash over me as I turned around. There was no rage, only a clear and resolute purpose now. I walked into my office and retrieved the manila folder. I walked back into the living room where my parents were laughing. They were telling a story about my sister's childhood generosity. I stood in front of them until their laughter finally trailed off. I did not say a single word to interrupt their happy story. I simply held out the folder for my father to take it. He looked at me with a confused but gentle expression. Then he looked down at the first page I had put on top. It was the lab report showing the baby's true parentage. The cheerful party atmosphere around us suddenly seemed to freeze. My father's smile slowly began to crumble from his face. My father stared at the lab report for a full 10 seconds. Then he dropped the folder as if it had burned his hands. The papers scattered across the polished hardwood floor for everyone to see. My mother rushed to his side and let out a choked little gasp. The cheerful music and party chatter died almost instantly. Every single person in the room turned to look at us. Mark's face went completely white when he saw the documents on the floor. My sister Emily immediately burst into loud theatrical tears. Mark lunged forward to gather the papers, shouting that I was having a breakdown. He tried to tell our guests that I had not been well lately, but his desperate attempt to control the story was far too late. Several of our relatives had already seen the hotel receipts. My uncle had picked up the damning lab report from the floor. Whispers and shocked glances started to spread through the room. My father, always a quiet and gentle man, looked at Mark with pure hatred. He took one slow, deliberate step towards my cheating husband. My mother's reaction was entirely different from my father's. She was not angry. She was just deeply mortified. Her first instinct was to hide this terrible family shame from our neighbors. She began ushering people towards the front door, telling them the party was over. Most of our guests were more than happy to quickly leave. They avoided looking at me as they hurried out of the house. Within 10 minutes, the room was empty of everyone except for us. Mark and Emily stood cornered by the fireplace, their faces pale. The time for their lies and denials was finally over. We all just stood there together in the deafening silence. The pretty decorations and leftover food looked ridiculous now. The perfect family that once lived here was now completely gone. My parents left with my crying sister soon after the guests. Mark tried to speak to me, but I locked myself in my office. I had nothing left to say to him or his apologies. My time for listening to their many lies was finally over. The next morning, I woke up with a singular, unyielding purpose. My first phone call was to the best divorce lawyer in the city. We met in her downtown office just a few hours later. I presented her with the neatly organized folder of evidence. She was impressed by my thorough and dispassionate preparation. I told her I wanted the house and full custody of the child. I explained I wanted to leave him with absolutely nothing. She outlined a precise and aggressive strategy for me to follow. I spent the rest of that day systematically dismantling our life. I went to our bank and immediately froze all our joint accounts. I transferred my own savings into a brand new personal account. Then I called every credit card company and canceled our cards. I had the locks on our house changed that same afternoon. Mark came home from work and found his key did not work. His clothes and personal belongings were waiting for him in boxes on the porch. I watched him from the window as he finally just gave up. The only communication he received from me was a very short email. It stated that all future contact must be through my lawyer. I also sent a second email to our entire circle of family and friends. It was a calm and factual account of the entire situation. I attached a digital copy of the lab report and one hotel bill. I was not looking for their sympathy. I was just seizing the narrative. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control. It was not happiness, but it was a quiet, cold return of my power. The retaliation from their side came much faster than I expected. My lawyer received an official letter within just 2 days. Mark and Emily had hired their own legal counsel. Their letter was full of outrageous accusations and blatant lies. They painted me as a mentally unstable and vindictive person. They used the fact I changed the locks as proof of my instability. They claimed I was an unfit mother for our newborn son. Then came the threat that was designed to break me completely. Emily, as the biological mother, was planning to sue for full custody. They said she feared for the safety of her child in my care. Using my own son as a weapon against me was their next move. The conflict immediately escalated from a divorce into a brutal war. The news of the custody battle spread through our community. Friends and family were now being forced to take a side. I would hear people whispering about me in the local grocery store. My mother called me every day, begging me to reconsider my actions. She wanted me to be the bigger person for the family's sake. She cared more about appearances than she did about the truth. Mark and Emily believed that this emotional pressure would make me crumble. They expected me to surrender to avoid a public fight, but they had completely and totally underestimated my resolve. Their ugly threats did not break my spirit, they hardened it. I met with my lawyer again and gave her new instructions. I told her to spare no expense in this legal battle. I authorized her to hire private investigators to dig into their lives. I was no longer just defending my actions or my position. I was now fully committed to achieving a total victory. There was no turning back now. I was in far too deep. The private investigators I hired delivered their final report last week. The information inside was far more damning than I ever imagined. They discovered Mark had been embezzling money from his employer for years. He used his position to approve fake invoices for his own benefit. He needed the extra cash to fund his secret life with my sister. The investigators also uncovered a secret about Emily's past. She had filed a fraudulent insurance claim after a minor car accident. She had lied to the police and the insurance company for a payout. This was the leverage that I needed to end the entire war. We scheduled a final settlement meeting at my lawyer's office. It was the first time I had seen them since the christening. They walked in looking confident, ready for a fight over custody. Before their lawyer could even speak, my attorney placed 2 large envelopes on the table. She explained the contents of the first sealed package. It was a complete file detailing Mark's embezzlement from his company. Copies were addressed to his CEO and the district attorney's office. The second envelope contained proof of Emily's insurance fraud. That package was ready to be sent to the state licensing board. My lawyer gave them our final, non-negotiable terms. They would drop the custody suit and sign away all parental rights. They would agree to every single demand in our divorce settlement. If they refused to sign everything today, she would mail the envelopes. It was not a negotiation. It was a simple statement of fact. The color drained from both of their faces as they sat there. Their attempt to destroy me had led to their own ruin. They signed every single paper without saying another word. The war was over, and I had achieved my total victory. 6 months have passed since I walked out of that lawyer's office. The divorce is finalized, and the house is now only in my name. My life is quiet and orderly, just how an accountant likes it. I won every single thing that I had fought so hard for. I have my financial security, and I have my beautiful son. I have not spoken a single word to Mark since that day. I heard through a distant relative that he lost his job. He apparently moved to a different state to start over again. My sister Emily is a complete ghost to me now. The woman I grew up with might as well be dead. My relationship with my parents is fractured beyond any real repair. We have short, polite phone calls about the weather. We never mention the 2 names that have been surgically removed from our family. They cannot look at me without seeing the wreckage I caused. Sometimes I sit in this big, silent house at night. I am a good mother to my son in every practical way. He is fed and clothed and is perfectly safe here. I provide him with a calm and very predictable routine, but when I look down at his face while he is sleeping, I see them. I recognize the familiar shape of my husband's jaw. I see my sister's blue eyes staring back up at me. This child, who I wanted for a decade, is a monument. He is a living reminder of the greatest betrayal of my life. I won the war, but I live permanently in the blast radius. There was no comfort to be found in my victory. There is only the quiet, the distance, and the emptiness. If you enjoyed this video, support it with a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your reaction helps me create new stories.